All right, so you want to know the best way to spend your time in your 20s to, set yourself up for wealth and happiness.
Big questions.
Huge. And to unpack it all, we've got a mountain of Naval Ravikant wisdom.
Oh, yeah.
Interviews, podcasts, tweets. The man is a, quote, machine.
He is. And we're also going to throw in some David Deutsch.
Oh, yeah, I love Deutsch.
Physicist, philosopher extraordinaire.
All right, so we're diving deep, some big ideas here, but don't worry, we'll keep it relatable.
We'll make it real.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just to kind of frame this whole thing, what jumped out at me, especially from naval stuff, is this idea that time is your most valuable asset.
Yeah.
Even more so than money, especially when you're young.
Yeah, I think both of these guys, Deutsch and Naval, they both really emphasize getting the fundamentals right.
Right.
It's not about like quick hacks or shortcuts. It's about building that solid foundation for long-term success, long-term happiness.
Okay, so time is the most valuable asset. How do we actually use it wisely then?
Well, so Naval, he actually suggests you think of it almost like setting a high hourly rate for yourself.
Okay.
Even before you're earning big bucks. It's like a mental model, right?
Right.
To help you prioritize.
Okay, so walk me through this hourly rate idea. Like, how do I actually apply this?
So think about it this way. If you value your time at, let's just throw out a number, $5,000 an hour, are you going to spend 3 hours arguing with customer service over a broken gadget?
Probably not.
Probably not, right? Like you'd rather just delegate that or outsource it and focus on something that's, going to actually generate more value.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
So it's about constantly evaluating how you're spending your time and making sure it aligns with your goals.
Exactly. And, it might seem a little abstract now, but as you build your career, as your earning potential increases, this mindset becomes super valuable.
Okay, that makes total sense. So we're prioritizing our time, but what exactly should we be focusing on? Like, especially in our 20s.
Yeah.
Naval talks a lot about finding your play.
He does. Right.
He does. And it can seem kind of counterintuitive, right? Because it goes against this whole work hard mentality.
Right. Right. Isn't hard work important?
Yeah, of course hard work is important.
I thought that was like the key.
But Naval is saying it shouldn't feel like a grind.
Okay.
He believes, you should be seeking out what feels like play to you. Like that activity you're so passionate about that it doesn't even feel like work.
So instead of forcing myself to do things that I hate, I should be like exploring my interests, finding what I truly enjoy.
Exactly. It's about identifying what you're uniquely good at. Something that feels effortless to you. Something that, might seem challenging to others.
Right.
But for you, it's like, yeah, I can do this all day long.
Yeah.
That's where real wealth creation happens.
Okay, I like that. Finding that sweet spot where passion meets skill.
Yeah.
But how does this all translate into actual wealth? The kind of wealth we think of.
That's where judgment comes in, which Naval emphasizes a lot.
Okay.
He says, look, in today's world, leverage is everywhere. But leverage is useless without good judgment.
So it's not just about working hard or finding your passion. It's about making smart decisions.
Yes.
That lead to bigger outcomes.
Exactly. And that's where things like, specific knowledge come in.
Hold on. Specific knowledge. Explain that. Give me an example.
Sure. Okay, so imagine you're really into investing. You can read all the books, take all the courses, right? But the real masters of investing are the ones who've developed this deep, almost intuitive understanding of the markets.
Right.
Through years of experience.
Experience, yeah.
That's specific knowledge.
Okay.
And that can't be easily replicated.
So it's about going beyond the textbook.
Yes.
Gaining that real world experience. But how do I do that if I'm just starting out?
Well, Naval encourages young people to find opportunities where they can take on real accountability.
Okay.
Even if it means, making mistakes and failing publicly.
But failing can be scary.
Oh, of course.
Oh.
It's natural to fear failure. But, failure is just feedback.
It helps you refine your judgment, develop that specific knowledge that's ultimately going to lead to success.
So it's about embracing those challenges, seeing them as opportunities to learn and grow.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is where, another one of Naval's kind of concepts comes in, thinking like a principal.
Okay. Break that down for me. What does that mean? Think like a principal.
It means taking ownership of your decisions, your outcomes. It means aligning your incentives with the people you're working with.
So even if I'm working for someone else, I should always be thinking about how to create value.
Yes.
For the company as a whole, not just for myself.
Precisely. And this principle applies to your personal life, too. It's taking responsibility for your own happiness, your own well-being.
This is making so much sense. Now, we've talked a lot about Naval's ideas. What about David Deutsch? I know he has this whole concept of good explanations. But how does that fit into all this talk about, wealth and happiness?
Well, Deutsch argues that, seeking good explanations is the key to understanding the world, making progress in general.
So what makes a good explanation? Like, what are we talking about here?
So according to Deutsch, a good explanation, it's testable, it's hard to vary, it explains things in a way that's consistent with reality and allows us to make, accurate predictions about the future.
So it can be tested, proven wrong potentially. It's specific. It's not just some vague idea.
Exactly. It's got to hold up under scrutiny.
But how does this apply to, finding my play and creating wealth?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, seeking good explanations, it means constantly learning, testing, refining your understanding of yourself, of the world, being open to new ideas, questioning your assumptions, being willing to change course when necessary.
So it's not about blindly following someone else's, recipe for success.
Right.
It's about developing your own understanding and using that to create value.
Precisely. And that's a great segue into, another important point that Naval makes, that wealth isn't just about money.
Right.
It's about freedom.
Freedom, yeah.
The freedom to do what you want, when you want, with who you want.
That's such a crucial distinction. Money's just a tool.
Yeah.
True wealth is about having the autonomy to live life on your own terms.
Exactly. And this actually ties into another, I think, fascinating idea that Naval explores, that happiness is actually a skill.
That's right.
Happiness isn't something that just kind of happens to you. It's something you cultivate through conscious effort. It's like building a muscle.
Okay, but how do you actually train for happiness?
Well, one key insight from Kapil Gupta,
Oh, yeah, Gupta, yeah.
a thinker who focuses on, understanding the mind, is that a lot of our unhappiness actually stems from our attachment to prescriptions.
Prescriptions.
Yeah.
What does that mean in this context?
So by prescriptions, Gupta means things like how-to guides, life hacks, those step-by-step formulas for achieving specific outcomes.
Right.
They can be useful for some things, like learning a technical skill, but they often fall short when it comes to more complex areas, like happiness, relationships, creativity.
So you're saying instead of searching for that magic formula for happiness,
Right.
we should be focusing on understanding ourselves better.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that happiness isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of deal,
Right.
It's about figuring out what truly brings you joy, what aligns with your values.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we figure out what truly makes us happy?
Well, both Naval and Gupta emphasize the importance of seeking truth over prescriptions.
Okay.
It's about constantly questioning your beliefs, being open to new information, and being willing to change your mind, when you encounter compelling evidence.
So it's about developing that independent thinking, not just blindly accepting what everyone else tells you.
Exactly. It's about developing your own internal compass, figuring out what truly matters to you, and then aligning your actions with those values.
That's a powerful idea.
Yeah.
But what about those times when life throws you a curveball,
Yeah.
Those unexpected challenges that can really knock you off?
Okay.
How do you stay positive and resilient in the face of adversity?
That's where understanding the nature of happiness becomes crucial. Naval argues that a lot of our unhappiness actually comes from our own minds.
Okay.
Our anxieties, fears, those limiting beliefs we hold on to.
So it's not necessarily the external events themselves that make us unhappy,
Right.
but our internal reaction to them.
Exactly. And this is where Gupta's concept of exposure comes in.
Okay.
He argues that, if we expose ourselves to truth, to a clear understanding of reality, then our minds naturally start to align with that truth and our suffering diminishes.
Okay. Can you give me a concrete example of that?
Sure. So let's say you're constantly worried about money, right?
Mhm.
You're anxious about not having enough, losing what you have, not being able to provide for yourself or your family.
Right.
That anxiety can be crippling even if you're actually doing okay financially.
Yeah. I think a lot of people can relate to that. Financial anxiety is a real thing.
Absolutely. But Gupta argues that if you expose yourself to the truth about money, that it's a tool, that your worth as a person isn't tied to your net worth, that true security comes from within, then that anxiety naturally begins to fade.
So it's about replacing those negative, fear-based thoughts
Right.
with more positive and empowering beliefs.
Precisely. And that ties back to Naval's idea about, setting a high hourly rate for yourself. It's not just about earning more money. It's about valuing your time, making sure you're using it in a way that brings you joy and fulfillment.
So instead of chasing every dollar,
Yeah.
you're being mindful about how you spend your time and energy, focusing on activities that have the potential to create wealth and happiness.
Exactly. It's about aligning your actions with your values. And this brings us back to the importance of finding your play.
Right, that thing that feels effortless and joyful,
Yeah.
that you could do for hours without getting bored.
Exactly. And when you find that you're not only more likely to be successful, but you're also more likely to be happy.
That makes perfect sense. But what about those of us who haven't quite figured out our play yet?
Yeah.
How do we go about discovering what truly lights us up?
That's where both Naval and Deutsch encourage us to embrace a spirit of curiosity and experimentation.
So you need to try new things, explore different options, be open to new experiences.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way. In fact, mistakes are essential to the learning process.
It's about embracing that growth mindset, right?
Yes.
Being willing to constantly learn and evolve.
Exactly. And that's where David Deutsch's concept of conjecture and criticism comes in.
Okay, break that down for me. What is conjecture and criticism?
So it's essentially the engine of knowledge creation. Deutsch argues that all progress starts with a conjecture, which is basically a bold guess about how something works.
Okay.
And then this conjecture is subjected to rigorous criticism, attempts to prove it wrong through testing and experimentation.
So it's not about stubbornly clinging to your ideas.
Right.
It's about actively challenging them and refining them based on new information.
Exactly. And this applies not just to scientific discoveries, but to every area of life, including, figuring out your play.
So if I want to find that thing that truly lights me up, I need to be willing to make some guesses about what I might enjoy and then put those guesses to the test.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to change course if something isn't working out. It's all part of the process.
That's a really liberating way to look at it.
Yep.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. The importance of time, finding your play, developing good judgment, seeking truth, embracing failure. It's a lot to process. What's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
I think the most important thing is to remember that the journey to wealth and happiness is deeply personal.
Right.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's about finding what works for you, what aligns with your values, what truly brings you joy and fulfillment. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be ups and downs, but it's all part of the process.
It's so easy to get caught up comparing ourselves to others,
Yeah.
and feeling like we're not doing enough or achieving enough.
It's a trap a lot of us fall into,
Yeah.
But the truth is, everyone's journey is different. And what matters most is that you're moving forward in a way that feels authentic and meaningful to you.
So how do we stay focused on our own path? How do we avoid getting sidetracked by all the noise and distractions out there?
Well, Naval really emphasizes the importance of focus. He talks about how we're constantly bombarded with distractions, especially in today's world, right? With social media and the 24/7 news cycle.
Right.
It can be really hard to stay focused on what truly matters.
So it's about being intentional with our attention and our energy, making sure we're spending our time on things that align with our values and goals.
Exactly. And, Kapil Gupta offers a similar perspective. He argues that a lot of our suffering stems from our attachment to distractions, things that ultimately don't matter. He encourages us to cultivate mindfulness, being present in the moment, appreciating the simple things in life.
So it's about finding that balance between striving for growth and achievement,
Yeah.
but also finding contentment and peace in the present moment.
Exactly. And that's where Naval's advice about setting a high hourly rate for yourself can be so helpful. It's not just about making more money. It's about valuing your time, making sure you're using it wisely.
So if you're spending hours scrolling through social media or binge watching TV, ask yourself, is this really how I want to be spending my time? Is this what's most important to me right now?
It's about making conscious choices about how you spend your most valuable asset. And remember, it's okay to take breaks and relax, but be intentional about it. Don't just let time slip away on things that don't bring you joy or move you closer to your goals.
This is all incredibly insightful, but I have to ask, what about when we make a plan, we're all fired up,
Yeah.
and then suddenly it feels overwhelming, like we could be doing something better with our time,
Yeah.
and that feeling can really derail our progress?
Yeah, that's a really common experience. It's almost like a fear of missing out, isn't it?
Exactly. It's like you start questioning everything, second-guessing yourself, and then you end up abandoning the plan altogether.
One thing that might be helpful is to remember that it's okay to adjust your plan along the way. Life is dynamic. Things change, and your priorities might shift too.
So it's not about rigidly sticking to a plan no matter what.
Right.
It's about being flexible and adapting as needed.
Exactly. Think of it like a roadmap. You have your destination in mind, but you might encounter detours or roadblocks along the way. That doesn't mean you abandon the journey. It just means you might need to adjust your route.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
But what about the overwhelm itself? Any tips on how to manage that feeling?
Well, one thing that Kapil Gupta emphasizes is the importance of, recognizing and minimizing anxieties.
Okay.
He argues that a lot of our overwhelm comes from those anxious thoughts swirling around in our minds. Thoughts like, I'm not doing enough, I'm falling behind, I should be further along by now.
It's like that constant pressure we put on ourselves
Yeah.
to achieve.
Exactly. And those thoughts can be really draining and demotivating. So Gupta suggests practices like meditation or journaling to help us, become more aware of our thoughts and to learn how to detach from them.
So it's about creating space between our thoughts and our actions, not letting those anxious thoughts dictate our choices.
Exactly. It's about learning to observe our thoughts without judgment and recognizing that they don't always reflect reality.
That's really helpful. Any other advice on how to stay motivated and avoid getting bogged down by overwhelm?
Well, remember Naval's advice about seeking out your play. When you're engaged in something you truly enjoy, the effort feels almost effortless.
So if you find yourself constantly feeling overwhelmed and resistant to your plan, it might be a sign that you're not fully aligned with what you're doing.
Precisely. It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. It's going to create a lot of friction and frustration.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from the importance of time and finding your play to seeking truth, embracing failure, and cultivating a mindset of abundance.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. And remember, it's all about taking what resonates with you and applying it to your own life.
Exactly. There's no one right way to do this. It's about experimenting, learning, and creating a life that feels authentic and fulfilling to you.
Well said. And remember, the journey to wealth and happiness is a lifelong adventure. So keep learning, keep growing, and keep creating the life you were meant to live.
This has been another insightful deep dive. Until next time, keep those insights coming.